The smell hit first. That IT was sharp and sour, like something citrus had been squeezed over the sea itself. It cut through the recycled air of the mess hall and reached every table before anyone even looked up from their food. Dust wrinkled the flat cartilage above his mouth. His wide gray eyes scanned the room. Beside him, two Solari crew members turned their heads slowly, their bioluminescent patches dimming in what any observant person would read as discomfort. The source of the smell was a human. Rael Duno set his container down at the far end of the long common table. He had a habit of eating alone, usually during the second half of the rest cycle when the hall was nearly empty. But today he had been held back in the cargo bay, sorting a misfiled shipment, and now the hall was full. Every seat near the walls was taken. He picked the closest open spot, sat down, and did not look at anyone. That he was a quiet man. Not unfriendly, just contained. The other crew of the GCS variant had learned in the first 2 weeks that Rail spoke when he had something to say and did not speak when he did not. He did his work without complaint. He fixed small things around the ship that were not his job to fix. He remembered names, but his food had always been a subject of quiet unease. The crew had seen him eat dried fish that smelled like it had been buried. They had seen him put a red powder on everything that made Funvas back away from the table entirely. Once he had eaten something dark and fermented straight from a small jar, and Physician Okra had watched from across the room with visible concern. Today was different. Rail unsealed the container. The smell sharpened immediately. Dust made a noise in his throat and turned fully around in his seat. Others followed. Even Captain Ara Shin, eating quietly at the officer's end of the table, glanced over. Inside the container was something none of them had seen before. Small shellfish, no bigger than a thumb, sat in a shallow pool of pale liquid. Thin strips of fish curled softly among them. Sliced ginger, white onion, and something green lay across the top. And as the cool air of the mess hall touched the contents of the box, one of the shellfish moved. A slow, curling motion like something waking. Dust pushed back from the table. "It is alive," he said. Not a question. Rail looked at the container, then at Dust. "Not really," he said. "The acid already did most of the work." "Most," Dust repeated. Rail picked up his fork, speared one of the curved shellfish, and ate it. He chewed slowly. He looked unbothered in the way that only someone who had done a thing 10,000 times could look unbothered. The mess hall was very quiet. Then Dust laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, almost involuntary, the kind that comes when the body does not know what else to do. Someone at the middle of the table made a clicking noise that served the same purpose for their species. One of the Solari crew dimmed fully for a moment, then brightened again in irregular pulses. "You're eating a living creature," Dust said, "in front of everyone." "The calamansi juice cooks it," Rail said. "It is called Kilawin. My grandmother made it every week." "Your grandmother," Dust said, "sounds terrifying." A few crew members laughed at that. Real laughter this time, easier and wider. Rail did not rise to it. He speared another piece and ate it. The sound of the fork against the container was very small in the quiet room. Funvas, sitting 3 seats down from Rail, did not laugh. Their soft glow held steady, pale blue. Watching, Dust was not finished. He turned to the crew member beside him, a young Tharek named Sel, and said something in their shared dialect. Sel covered his mouth with one hand. More laughter rippled down that side of the table. Rail ate. He ate with the same calm he brought to everything. He did not look at Dust again. He did not explain himself further. He worked through the container slowly, piece by piece, the sharp, sour smell of calamansi and vinegar drifting steadily across the table. By the time he sealed the empty container and stood to leave, the laughter had faded. Dust was talking about something else entirely. The Solari crew had gone back to their meals. The moment had passed the way these moments usually pass, loudly for a moment, and then not at all. But Funvas watched Rail carry his container to the cleaning station. They watched him rinse it, dry it, and tuck it under his arm. They watched him leave the mess hall without looking back. Their glow stayed blue for a long time after he was gone. And across the hall, Physician Okra had already opened a new file on her personal display. She was pulling up everything the Galactic Medical Archive had on human dietary practices. She had seen strange things in 20 years of deep space medicine. But something about the way that man had eaten gave her a feeling she could not yet name. She began to read. The file was 43 pages long, and Okra had not expected that. She had assumed human dietary records would be a short appendix, a footnote in the broader survey of Death World species. Something clinical, something brief. Instead, the archive gave her fermentation logs, toxicity charts, historical accounts of humans deliberately consuming things their own scientists had labeled dangerous, and a subsection titled Voluntary Pain Ingestion Through Food that she had to read 3 times before she accepted it was real. Capsaicin, a compound that triggered pain receptors with no nutritional value. Humans put on everything: alcohol, a cellular toxin. Humans had built entire social rituals around it. Certain molds, bacteria, and live cultures consumed intentionally and daily. Okra closed the file, then opened it again. When Dus arrived at her door the following morning with a formal wellness concern, she had already written half her response, that he stood in the medical bay entrance with his arms folded and his wide gray eyes carrying the specific look of someone who believed they were doing a good thing. The human, he said, is harming himself, possibly without knowing it. The food he consumed yesterday was visibly alive. This is a medical matter. Okra pulled up Rail's health record on her display. It was, she had to admit, almost offensively clean. Better lung function than average for his species. Gut flora that the archive described as unusually adaptive. No parasites, no abnormal toxin marquios, no inflammation. I will speak with him, she said. Dus nodded like he had won something and left. Rail arrived 20 minutes later when she sent for him. He sat down in the examination chair without being asked and folded his hands in his lap. He was not defensive. He was not nervous. He looked like a man who had been called to a meeting he had been expecting for some time. Tell me about the food. Okra said he told her Kilewin was old. Not just old for him, old for his people. It came from coastal communities that had been eating from the sea for longer than most galactic civilizations had been recording history. The calamansi juice, a small citrus fruit, created an acid environment that disrupted cell walls and neutralized most pathogens. The process was not cooking in the traditional sense, but it was not simply eating raw food either. It was something in between, a transformation that did not use heat. The movement you saw, Rail said, was the acid working. Muscle response. By the time I was eating it, the tissue was already changed. Okra studied his face while he spoke. He was not performing patience. He simply had it. And if the acid does not reach every part of the food, she asked, then your gut handles the rest. Rail said, humans have been doing this for a very long time. Our bodies learned. She ran a standard panel on him anyway. Everything came back normal. Better than normal. His stomach acid was notably more corrosive than the archive baseline for humans, a common adaptation in people who grew up eating traditional coastal diets. She cleared him and said so. Rail stood to leave. At the door, he paused. The food is not strange to me, he said. I know it looks strange, but where I come from, the sea is not something you are afraid of. You learn to live with it. The food is part of that. Okra did not respond right away. She was thinking about a word that kept appearing in the archive file. Adaptation. It showed up in almost every section about human food habits. Not as a medical term, as a philosophy. Thank you, she said, for explaining. He nodded once and left. She added a note to his file. No medical concerns. Dietary practices consistent with regional Earth tradition. Patient demonstrates thorough understanding of the biological processes involved. Then she sat for a while in her empty medical BAY.I in her species. Food safety had been formalized 800 years ago. There were approved sources, approved preparation methods, approved nutrient ratios. No one got sick from food anymore. No one had in centuries. It was considered one of the great achievements of Veluan civilization. She had always thought so too. She was less sure now. Not because Rail's food was better or safer, but because of the way he had talked about it. Like it was a relationship. Like the food and the person had an understanding. Okra did not have an understanding with her food. She had a schedule. She opened the archive again and scrolled to the section on fermentation, then to the one on spice, then to a passage she had skimmed the night before, a short ethnographic note from a human researcher who had written, "The purpose of difficult food is not to survive it. The purpose is to know that you can." Outside her door, down the corridor, she could hear the cargo bay running. Rail was back at work. She read the passage again. Fun Voss found Rail in the lower cargo bay during the quiet hour, when the ship hummed to itself and most of the crew rested. He was restacking a set of misaligned supply crates with the slow, methodical care of someone who found satisfaction in order. His back was to the door. He did not hear Finn come in, but he noticed the soft blue light that preceded them across the floor. Solari could not help announcing themselves that way. Their glow shifted with their mood, and Fun's was the particular shade of blue that meant they were thinking hard about something. Rail kept stacking. "You can ask," he said. Finn stopped a few paces away. Their light flickered once. "How did you know?" "You have been looking at me since the mess hall," he said. "Not like the others. They looked because it was funny. You looked like you were trying to solve something." Finn was quiet for a moment. Then, "I was not laughing." "I know." They watched him lift a crate and set it into place. Then Finn sat down on a low shelf bracket and drew their knees up, a posture Rail had come to recognize as their version of settling in. "I want to understand it," Finn said. "Not just the dish. All of it. The dried fish that smells like it has been in the ground. The red powder you put on everything. The things you eat that Okra has files on." Rail smiled at that. "Small but real. Okra pulled files? She has been reading for 2 days." He finished the crate stack and leaned against it, crossing his arms. He considered Fun for a moment, the way he considered most things, without rushing. "What does your people's food taste like?" he asked. Fun blinked. They had not expected the question to go that direction. "It is balanced," they said. "Nutrients distributed correctly. Some warmth, some mild flavor. Nothing that disrupts. Nothing that surprises you." "No." Rail nodded slowly. "The red powder is called chili. The compound in it is called capsaicin. It binds to the pain receptors in your mouth, and your body reads it as heat, as burning. There is no actual damage, but your brain does not know that at first. So it releases endorphins. It tries to help you survive something that is not actually hurting you." Fun's glow shifted. Lighter, curious. "You eat it for the false pain?" "Some people do," Rail said. "I eat it because I grew up eating it, and now food without it tastes incomplete. But the first time my father gave it to me, I cried. I was 4 years old, and I thought the food was attacking me." He smiled again. He laughed and said, "Good. Now you know you are alive." Fun was very still. "The fermented fish," Rail continued, "is called bagoong. It is shrimp paste. It ferments for months. It smells terrible. It tastes like everything the sea has ever known. A small amount of it makes a whole pot of vegetables taste like something worth eating. My grandmother kept a jar of it that was 10 years old. She said the older it got, the more it remembered." "Remembered what?" "The ocean," he said simply. "Where it came from." Fun's light went a soft, uncertain gold. "On my world," they said after a while, "we have not eaten anything that could cause us discomfort in over 2,000 years. Every food source is cultivated, balanced, and approved. We have not lost a person to food in recorded history." "That sounds peaceful," Rail said. "It is," Fun agreed. Then, quieter, "But I have never cried from eating something. I have never felt like food was teaching me anything. I did not know that was possible." Rail looked at them without pity and without superiority. "Just looking. Humans come from a planet that was trying to kill us constantly," he said. "The food was part of that. Some of it was poisonous. Some of it fought back. Some of it went bad before we could eat it. So we learned to use that too, to ferment it, to salt it, to turn the rot into something useful. We did not beat the danger out of our food. We learned to live inside it." He pushed off the crate and picked up his work gloves. "The kilewin my grandmother made," he said, pulling one on, "was not about showing off. It was not even about hunger. It was about sitting at her table and feeling the ocean in the room with us. She grew up fishing. Her mother grew up fishing. Back and back and back, all the way to people who had no boats yet and stood in shallow water, pulling things out with their hands. He pulled on the second glove. The food remembered all of that. And when I eat it, so do I. Finn sat in the soft hum of the cargo bay for a long time after Rail went back to work. Their glow had settled into something that had no simple name in galactic standard. It was the color they turned when something changed inside them without permission. They thought about 2,000 years of safe, balanced, approved meals. They thought about a woman standing in shallow water. They thought about a 4-year-old boy crying at a table while his father laughed with love. Funvas was not sure what they had lost, but they were beginning to understand that something was missing and that they had never noticed its absence until right now, in a cargo bay that smelled faintly of calamansi, sitting with a man who ate the ocean and remembered everything. Dus did not let it go. That was the thing about Dus. He was not a cruel person. He was not even a mean one, exactly. He was the kind of person who needed to be right in the same way some people needed air, steadily, constantly, without thinking about it much. And for 2 days he had been quietly not right about Rail, which sat in him like a stone. He started small. Comments in passing. A joke at breakfast about not wanting to sit near anything that was still moving. A remark to Sel about how primitive survival habits were understandable but perhaps should stay in the past. Nothing aimed directly at Rail. Everything aimed directly at Rail. Rail said nothing. On the third day, in the mess hall, with most of the crew present for the midday rest break, Dus leaned back in his chair and said to the table at large, "I simply do not understand how a species can call itself civilized and still eat things that are alive. It is not a cultural difference. It is a developmental stage, like cooking with fire instead of thermal units." A few people nodded. A few looked at their trays. Rail, at the end of the table, did not look up from his meal. "If you can explain it," Dus continued, with the easy confidence of a man who did not expect an answer, "I will take your cargo shifts for a week." All of them. The table went a little still. Rail set down his fork. He looked at Dus with an expression that was not anger. It was something quieter and harder to read. "What do I get if you cannot understand it?" he asked. Dus spread his hands. "Name it." "Same thing," Rail said. "A week of your shifts." Dus laughed. "Fine. Explain it." "Not today," Rail said. He picked his fork back up. "Tomorrow. Here. Same time." Dus looked at the crew, found enough smiling faces to feel comfortable, and agreed. The next day, the mess hall was full before the rest break started. Rail arrived carrying 2 containers, a handle bag, and a small portable heat unit that he set up at the end of the table without asking permission. He worked quietly and methodically while people took their seats. The smell that began to fill the room was not the sharp citrus smell from before. This was something warmer. Garlic hit first, deep and rich from oil, then something sweet and thick underneath it, then the soft, sour edge of tamarind, climbing slow. People stopped talking. Rail placed 2 dishes side by side. On the left, the kilewin, the same as before, pale shellfish and calamansi juice, ginger, onion. On the right, a bowl of sinigang, a clear, deep broth the color of late sunset, with fish and vegetables folded gently into it. He put a third thing down. A small plate of white rice, pressed firm. He looked at Dus. "I am not going to explain it with words first," he said. "I'm going to show you." He began with the sinigang. He served a small cup of the broth to everyone along his side of the table, then pushed a few cups toward the other side without making it an offer or a demand. Just there if wanted. Then he talked. He described the tamarind, a pod fruit that grew heavy and brown and so sour it dried your mouth, and how Filipino cooks had learned to balance that sourness with saltfish and pork bones and tomato until it became something that was not sour anymore, but alive with layers. He described how his mother made it on rainy days and how the smell of it from the next room meant the world outside could do what it wanted, because inside everything was fine. He described the rice. Just rice. The way it was washed 3 times. The right amount of water. The way his grandmother pressed it into the cup with 2 fingers to check the density before she cooked it. He described the kilewin last, where the shellfish came from, what calamansi did to the tissue at the cellular level, what the bite felt like, the acid, the salt, the sea, the cold all at once. He described standing on a dock as a boy and his grandmother handing him a piece straight from the bowl she was making and saying, "Here, this is where we come from." The mess hall was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with discomfort. Finn reached over and took a cup of Sinigang. They sipped it. Their glow went immediately bright, startled, then warm. They took another sip. Others tried it. Reactions scattered across the table. Some winced at the sour. Some went back immediately for more. A Therat crew member near the middle of the table made a sound no one had a translation for, but that looked like it meant something good. Dus had not moved. Rail poured a cup of Sinigang and set it in front of him. Dus looked at it. He looked at the crew. He looked at Rail, but he drank it. He put the cup down and said nothing for a long moment. Then, "It is very sour." "Yes," Rail said. "And the sourness is the point. The sourness is what holds everything else together," Rail said. "Without it, the broth is just warm water." Dus looked at his empty cup, but he did not apologize. He did not say Rail had one. He simply reached out, pulled the container of Kilewin a little closer, and studied it for a long moment with an expression that had lost most of its certainty. Rail watched him and said nothing that he did not need to. Captain Arashin had 4 arms, a structure mind, and the specific discomfort of a person who had been thinking about something for 2 days without deciding what to do with it. She sent for Rail after the evening duty shift, when the ship had settled into its night cycle and the corridors were dim and quiet. She had her office lights at half strength when he arrived. He noticed. Most people did not notice things like that, but Rail had a habit of reading rooms before he entered them. She gestured to the seat across from her desk. "He's Saturday. I watched what you did in the mess hall today," she said. "I know," he said. "You were at the far end." She had been. She had sat there with her meal finished and her display dark and watched every moment of it. She had watched Dus's face change. She had watched Finn's glow go bright. She had watched a crew that had been pulling quietly in different directions sit together, surprised by a bowl of broth. "You did not have to do that," she said. "No," he agreed. Ara leaned forward and placed 2 of her 4 hands flat on the desk. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, not carefully." "All right. Were you afraid of your own food when you were a child?" The question surprised him. She could see that a small shift in his posture, not discomfort, more like recalibration. "Yes," he said. "The first time my father gave me chili, I was 4. The first time I ate Kilewin, I was 6. Both times I was afraid. And they gave it to you anyway." "They gave it to me because of that," he said. "Not to be cruel, because the point was the fear. My grandmother used to say that the food was not trying to hurt you. It was trying to introduce itself. And the fear was just your body paying attention." Ara was quiet. She had pulled Rail's personnel file 2 days ago. Born in a small fishing province. Grew up working on his family's boat before he was 10. Had handled cargo on 3 different vessels before the variant. Incident record, 0. Commendations, 4. All from previous captains, all noting the same thing. Reliable. Self-sufficient. Good for crew morale in ways that did not draw attention to themselves. She had also spent most of the previous evening reading the same archive file Okra had been working through. She had read the section on Death World species dietary practices 3 times. She had read a line near the end that she could not stop thinking about. "I found something in the Galactic archive," she said. "A passage." It said that species from high-danger origin worlds tend to develop what the researchers called intimate relationships with risk. Not a tolerance of it. An intimacy. The difference being that tolerance is passive and intimacy is chosen. Rail said nothing. He was listening the way he always listened, with his full attention and without interruption. "I did not entirely understand what that meant," Ara continued, "until I watched you cook today." She stood and moved to the narrow viewport behind her desk. The starfield outside was dense and still. "On my world," she said, "food safety became law 800 years ago. There is an agency. There are standards. There have been no food-related deaths in centuries. When I was young, this was explained to us as one of the highest marks of civilization. The ability to remove danger from necessity. It is an achievement," Rail said. "Yes," she agreed. "But I watched you today, and I thought about something. The Veluan have not had to face a dangerous meal in 8 centuries. We have not had to decide to eat something frightening. We have not had to learn that our body could handle something our mind feared." She paused, and I wondered what that has cost us. "Not in health. in something else. Rail was looking at her steadily. Not pushing. Waiting. Do Veluan children learn what fear feels like? He asked. She had known the question was coming. She had been asking it herself for 2 days. They learn about it, she said. In education, as a historical concept, as a biological response we have mostly designed around. But do they feel it? He asked. And then feel themselves decide anyway. She did not answer. She stood at the viewport for a moment longer, watching the stars, and then turned back to her desk. When we reach port, she said, I am filing a recommendation that human dietary practices be added as a required cultural briefing for all mixed species vessels. Not as a warning, as information. Rael looked at her. That is a generous thing to do. It is a necessary thing, she said. She sat down again. I also want to say that I heard what Dus said in the mess hall before your meal. The comment about developmental stages. Her voice was measured and flat and carried, somehow, a great deal of weight. I will be speaking to him separately. You do not have to, Rael said. He drank the soup. Ara looked at him for a moment, and then made a sound that took him a moment to recognize as a laugh. Short and used, like something she had found at the back of a drawer. You are an unusual person, Rael Duno, she said. My grandmother would have been pleased to hear that, he said. She dismissed him with a nod. He stood, did that small incline of the head he always did at doorways, and left. Ara sat alone in her half-lit office. She thought about her own childhood, about the careful meals and the safety standards and the agency pamphlets on approved food sources. She thought about how she had never cried at a table, never been afraid of something on a plate, never felt a food introduce itself to her. She thought about an old woman pressing rice in a cup with 2 fingers. She thought about what it meant to teach a child fear by handing them something wonderful. Rael did not announce it. He put a handwritten note on the mess hall board the evening before, the kind of plain paper note that stood out precisely because no one else on the ship used plain paper for anything. It said, meal tomorrow, midday rest, come if you want. That was all. No occasion listed. No explanation. He started cooking 4 hours before the rest break. The cargo bay was near the kitchen corridor and cell. Walking past on an errand, stopped at the smell. He stood in the corridor for a long moment, nose working, and then went and told 3 people without being asked to. By the time Rael had the garlic softening in oil, there were 2 crew members standing near the mess hall entrance pretending to check their displays that he let them stand there. He did not perform the cooking. He just cooked. The care came first, the long way. Peanut sauce built slow from ground roasted peanuts and toasted rice, deepened with banana blossom and eggplant and long beans. The whole thing going brick-colored and thick and rich. The smell of it was something the Galactic standard vocabulary did not have a clean word for. Warm and nutty and deep, like the inside of something that had been kept safe for a long time. Then the sinigang, the same as the day before, but a full pot this time. Then garlic rice, pressed and fragrant. Then a small plate of bagung, the fermented shrimp paste for anyone who wanted to go further. And at the end, set slightly apart, a clean bowl of kilewin. Not a challenge. Not a demonstration. Just there, as it had always been, the same dish it always was. When the rest break started, the crew came. They did not file informally. They arrived the way people arrive at something good, in 1s and 2s, pulled by the smell, finding their seats with less noise than usual. Even crew members who did not typically share the same rest break appeared at the door, looked at the spread on the table, and found reasons to stay. Rael served without ceremony. He placed food in front of people. He pointed out what was in each dish when asked. He did not explain them the way he had the day before. There was no lecture. He just fed people. The care went first. The Therek crew members, herbivores by nature, took to the banana blossom and eggplant immediately. Fun Voss took a small spoonful of the peanut sauce directly and stood still for a moment with their glow going through 3 colors in rapid sequence. Then they sat down and ate a full bowl without speaking. The sinigang drew the same reaction as the day before, but stronger because there was more of it and people were less afraid now. The sourness hit and people reached for more instead of pulling back. Captain Arashin arrived midway through, sat at the middle of the table, and accepted a bowl of care without comment. She ate it quietly. No one made anything of it. It was simply the captain, eating with her crew, Physician Okra tried the bagung on a small bite of rice. Her reaction was immediate and extreme, both eyes widening, her secondary gill slits flaring open. She set the rice down. Then, after a moment of internal negotiation that was entirely visible on her face, she picked it up and finished it. That is, she said carefully, extraordinarily intense. Yes, Rail said. It tastes like someone compressed the entire ocean into something the size of my thumb. That is exactly what it is, he said. She took another piece. Dus arrived late. He stood at the doorway for a moment, taking in the table, the crew, the food, the quiet, comfortable noise of people eating something they had not expected to like. He found an empty seat near the middle, not far from where he usually sat, and lowered himself into it without speaking. Rail set a bowl of care in front of him without being asked. Dus looked at it. He looked at the thick peanut sauce, the soft vegetables folded into the warmth of it. He ate the whole bowl. He did not say it was good. He did not say anything at all. But when the bowl was empty, he sat with it in front of him, and his usual restless energy was gone. He was just a person who had eaten something that reached back through him and touched something older than opinion. Near the end of the meal, Finn moved down the table and sat beside Rail. They looked at the Kilawin, still in its bowl, mostly untouched. Can I try it? They asked. Yes, Rail said. Finn picked up a small piece of shellfish and ate it. Their glow went very bright, then stuttered, then settled into a long, slow pulse of deep gold. The color they turned when something changed inside them. They did not say anything for a while. Then, I understand now. What you said in the cargo bay. About the food remembering. Rail nodded. It tastes like something that has been alive, Finn said. Not like death. Like the opposite. Like it is still going. Yes, he said. That is exactly it. The meal wound down the way good meals do. Not with an ending, but with a gradual loosening, people leaning back, conversations going soft and unimportant, the pleasant weight of being fed settling over the table. Rail cleared and cleaned without asking for help. Those Cell came and helped anyway without saying so. When a mess hall was nearly empty, Finn paused at the door and looked back at Rail wiping down the table. They understood something now that they had not understood a week ago. Rail had not opened his lunchbox to prove anything. He had not cooked today to win anything. He had not told his stories to teach anyone. He had done it because he was far from home, and the food was the closest thing he had to his grandmother's table, and eating alone, away from everyone who knew what the food meant, was the quietest kind of loneliness there was. He had shared it the only way it could be shared, to be why feeding people. Finn's glow went warm gold in the empty corridor. Behind them, Rail set the clean container down and looked out the small mess hall viewport at the stars. Somewhere far back along the ship's path was a coastal province, a wooden dock, an old woman pressing rice in a cup with 2 fingers, but he carried it with him. That was enough.